Once again, this is Gordon Zeiderwig, and I'm speaking to you about the Roman civil law and the Roman civil law tradition. We previously spoke about the history of the Roman civil law, how it grew out of the Roman Empire, how it went through the codifications of Theodosius and Justinian I, and how the Roman civil tradition, the Justinian Code, became lost to the West as the eastern half of the empire, the Byzantine Empire, experienced problems, and its influence was lessened in Western Europe. However, it didn't stay that way, at least for the Roman civil law it didn't. Around 1100, the Justinian Code, the civil law, was rediscovered by Italian legal scholars. They were impressed by the code's comprehensive nature and its orderly and systematic nature and organization, particularly at the University of Bologna. They began to teach the Roman civil law once again. At first, they taught and studied the Roman civil law tradition in its old context of the empire, and they sought to explain it in its old context of the empire, even though many of the institutions of the empire which were described in the code no longer existed. But it wasn't long that changed. Within 100 years, the legal scholars at the University of Bologna had begun to study the Roman civil tradition and relate it to the contemporary world. In other words, to adapt the Roman civil tradition to the world as it was then in the 1200s. For centuries, French, Spanish, German, and English students studied the Roman civil law in the Italian universities. And when they went back to the countries from which they were from, they took the Roman civil law with them, particularly the French, Spanish, and German students took the Roman civil tradition back with them to their home countries. This long process eventually led to a number of developments. One of these developments was what came to be called the Napoleonic Code. Napoleon, the Emperor Napoleon in France, was impressed by the Roman civil law. He was impressed by its organization, by its comprehensiveness. In 1804, he used the Roman civil law in his consolidation and organization of French law. It was an interesting process. Four eminent French scholars, French jurists, drafted the code, the Napoleonic Code, in a remarkably short time. They took the Roman civil law and adapted it to the three ideological pillars of the French system, which was private property, freedom of contract, and the patriarchal family. The Napoleonic Code thereafter spread throughout Europe and shortly through Latin America when the Latin American countries gained independence. Now later on in the 19th century, when Germany was molded into one country and the Germans sought to have a unified legal system, the Germans too utilized the Roman civil law as the basis of their system. And they published their German Civil Code in 1896. It went into use in 1900. And that German Civil Code heavily influenced the legal systems of China, Japan, Portugal, and Brazil. As you can see, the Roman civil law tradition has proven to be very adaptable. And you can look how adaptable it is and how widespread it is by going to a site that's maintained by the University of Ottawa. It is at www.juriglobe.ca. You click on the English. It's in a variety of language. Click on the English button, and you can go and you can see a map of where the civil law tradition systems are and how widely spread it is. Now, I want to point out to you that the civil law system is very adaptable, and it can be very different depending on the country. Let's look, for instance, at the French Napoleonic Code we just talked about and the German Code. The Napoleonic Code, the French Code, and the German Code come from the same Roman civil law system. The French Code is stated in general rules rather than in detailed provisions. It is a broad outline that doesn't seek to regulate and foresee everything. It's a broad outline, a statement of general legal principles. The German Code is completely different. It is very different. It is precise and detailed, as you might expect from the Germans. It uses special language that's defined in the code and used only in the code. It has elaborate cross-references between the sections and between the different parts of the code. It is very detailed, very precise, and intended for legal professionals to use. So two very different systems coming out of the same legal tradition. Now, the legal system you are probably most familiar with is the American legal tradition, which is not a civil law tradition. It is a system that arises out of the English law. It is called common law, and why it's called the common law is the subject of another course or subject talk. Let's just say that it arises out of English law, and the common law system is usually the prevalent system when a country was a colony or had been controlled by the English Empire at some point. Now, the common law and the civil law have differences. And how does the civil law differ from the system that you are used to seeing in the movies or on television or in the news? Well, let me point out just a few differences. There are many. It would take a course to do that. Those of you who go to law school can take comparative law in your second or third year, and you'll be able to study all these differences. But let me point out just a few. Legal codes are usually more comprehensive in the civil law countries. Judges interpret the legal codes. If there are gaps, they look back to the code's principles and doctrines. Both systems issue judicial opinions, but civil law judges are not bound or not obligated to follow prior case law like common law judges are. Common law judges must follow applicable prior cases. Civil law judges do not. Civil law judges may look at a case as an explanation or illustration of a principle. They are bound to follow the legal principle, but they are not bound to follow the case, and they may interpret the legal principle somewhat differently than the prior cases have. Both systems have judges, but common law judges are very different from civil law judges. Common law judges, American judges, are supposed to be impartial. They rule on evidence and testimony. They rule on the admissibility of evidence. They are supposed to be impartial during a trial. The common law tradition depends on the adversary system, which is the idea that two attorneys who are zealously representing their clients will arrive at something approaching the truth or at the truth. The judge's function is to be basically a referee between the two contending counsel. Now, a civil law judge They take more of an active inquisitorial role in the proceedings, as you might expect from a system derived from an imperial system. They initiate their own investigations. They decide on the witnesses to be called and questions to be asked. In the common law system, that would be predominantly up to the attorneys involved. Common law judges are trained first to be attorneys. They're trained in law school to be attorneys first, and then they become judges. Civil law judges are trained to be judges almost from the beginning. So it's a very different system. They are specialists from the very beginning. Now, juries, something you're very familiar with in the common law system, aren't used as much in civil law systems. In fact, they're very rare in many civil law systems. And in most civil law systems, they're used only for very serious felony cases. They're not used in non-criminal cases really very much at all or at all. So once again, the jury system is very, very different. So in conclusion, the Roman Empire is gone. It's been gone for quite some time, but like Thomas Sowell says, the Roman Empire's shadow still remains, and one of those shadows is the Roman civil law, which is a extremely widespread, very adaptable legal tradition that you see throughout the world.